Hi, everyone. Welcome to our now monthly Horticulture Town Hall meetings. We're very happy to have you here. We know that during the wintertime, plants are just as important in our homes, in our landscapes, and we're still thinking about doing things when it comes to the garden. Even though it is getting into winter, we're still putting our gardens to bed and moving forward. And then we're doing this during the winter months. We'll be meeting once a month, the third Wednesday of the month. And then in April, we'll start back up on a weekly basis and are always happy to have you all here. My name is Debbie Kelly. I am a horticulture specialist with University of Missouri Extension, of course, and I'm located in Jefferson County. Here is a map of all of us across the state. So we have a lot of open positions with our extension program, and we're slowly refilling that after COVID's coming hopefully to a close. And so hopefully we'll be having more of us here. But if you're in a county and there is an open position there, don't fret about it. Just contact any one of us that are up on the screen. If you've got questions between now and next month, we're always happy to answer those for you. We have lots of great information, lots of good questions that are coming in. And so what I want to do is just go ahead and turn this over to Pat Guinan and have him go ahead and present our weather update for the month.
Sounds good, Debbie. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's been about a month, and we've made it through October. We're halfway through November, but I always like to look back to see what we've seen over the past several weeks. And in the upper left, this is a little bit of October climatology. We have a lot of weather records that extend back well over 100 years, all the way back to 1895. And you can see in the upper left, the average October temperatures all the way from 1895 to 2021. And indeed, if you thought it was a warm October, it was. It was actually the warmest in 5 years. You have to go back to 2016 to find a warmer October. It ranked as the 15th warmest on record. It was about 3.5 degrees above normal. And the map here on the upper right shows the departure from normal temperatures, again, indicating for the entire state above normal temperatures for October. Not a bad thing to have because in addition to the warm temperatures, we had precipitation. It was dry in August and September. And so this was badly needed rainfall to help recharge those surface water supplies as well as the soil profile. And we got that. Lower left shows precipitation, again, going back to October of 1895, all the way through last October of 2021. It was a wet one. It was our wettest October since 2014, so the wettest October in 7 years, and it ranked as the 9th wettest October on record, so it fell in the top 10. Statewide average was about just short of 6 inches. It was nearly over 2.5 inches above normal. The map here in the lower right is radar estimates, and anything in those reds is indicative of 5 or more inches. Indeed, there were some drier pockets in east central Missouri, but for the most part, some much needed rainfall fell across much of the state. And with those warm temperatures, that really helped in regard to renewed grass growth for those cool season grasses. And we saw that because we really didn't have any freezing temperatures. Speaking of freezing temperatures, we're finally seeing some freezing temperatures, but it took, for many of us here in Missouri, it took November to see 32 degrees or colder. On the left, these are the first autumn freeze dates for this past fall for 2021. And you can see for most of Missouri, it wasn't until the first part of November, between November 1st and 10th, that we did see 32-degree temperatures or less. So pretty late to see that first fall freeze, but nonetheless, you know, that's been the trend. Look at on the right here, this map, looking at several weather stations that have a long-term record of daily temperatures all the way back to the 1800s. You can see in the blue area, these blue boxes are the median date for the long-term first fall freeze. And then in the pink box right here, you see for the past 20 years. And the trend is that we're seeing is that we are seeing a later first fall freeze. In general, it's about 5 days later when you look over the past 20 years and compare that over the long-term record. So indeed, this year was no exception to that with these late first fall freezes. And again, for many locations in Missouri, It wasn't until November when we saw these freezing temperatures. Well, we're now into November and a little bit more of a mixed bag in regard to temperatures for the first half of the month. The northwest quarter of the, or northwest half of the state's been running generally above normal for temperatures. This gray area is more near normal, cooler than normal temperatures across in these green shades. So a little bit of a transition here in Missouri. I would say it's been roller coaster like weather. We've had some very nice days, but we've also had some very chilly days in the state for the month of November so far. Not unusual when we talk about November. On precipitation on the right, a little bit drier, with the exception of Northwest Missouri. There was a significant rain event a little over a week ago. They saw some big rainfall totals up in Northwest Missouri that actually helped recharge the soil profile because it had been dry in that part of the state. But drier conditions we can see across much of the rest of the state so far for the month of November. Currently, there is a cold front. It's very evident that resides, it's bisecting the state as I speak. This is on the upper left. These are temperatures from about 10 minutes ago. You can see where that cold front lies. Look at these temperatures still in the 70s across St. Louis and southeastern parts of the state, in the mid to upper 60s. But you don't have to go very far to the north and west where temperatures are only in the 40s. So a very strong cold front impacting Missouri, moving through the state. These cooler temperatures are heading into southeast Missouri as we go into the afternoon. Dew points have also reflected much drier conditions, with dew points generally in the 20s and 30s where the cold front has passed through. A little bit more moisture here in southeast Missouri, with dew points still hanging pretty well up into the 50s, even some lower 60s. The forecast over the next few days, here in the middle is the high and low the low and high temperatures for tomorrow, Friday, and on through the weekend. You can see some cooler temperatures with that cold frontal passage, but I do believe it looks like by this weekend, of moderation with much milder conditions, more seasonable like temperatures as we go into Saturday and Sunday. I think on, let's see, Friday morning looks like the coldest temperatures impacting the state with generally lows. These will be some of the lowest temperatures we've seen so far for the fall, with generally lows statewide anywhere from the mid to upper 20s on Friday morning. High temperatures tomorrow will only be in the 40s across parts of northern Missouri, maybe getting into the 50s across southern parts of the state. And as I mentioned, as we go into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, much milder and more sunshine conditions on Saturday and Sunday. It does look like a very nice weekend shaping up for our state, with temperatures and little to no chances of any precipitation. This is the forecast over the next 7 days of precipitation. Again, not a lot anticipated. There is a system perhaps impacting southeastern parts of the state later today with the current front moving through, but then again, perhaps by middle of next week, that could perhaps bring anywhere from a quarter to a half inch of rain. It's been pretty dry in the Boot Heel for that matter, so probably some welcome rainfall in that part of the state. But it does look like for most of the rest of the state, little to no precipitation, at least over the next 7 days. And that'll take us right up to just before Thanksgiving, or right up, just the day before Thanksgiving. So little to no rainfall anticipated for the state, with the exception of far southeastern sections. This is the forecast of temperature and precipitation for next week. That will take us through the Thanksgiving holiday. You can see a little bit more, it's kind of a typical what we've been seeing for November, where the colder conditions to the north and east and warmer conditions to the west of Missouri, perhaps looking like we might have another, it looks like another cold front moving through on Monday, bringing us colder temperatures, a little bit more up and down as we get into Thanksgiving. Another cold front is expected to impact our state, but look for a trend towards cooler than normal conditions. And when we say cooler than normal conditions, typically highs around this time of year are in the upper 40s and low 50s, and lows would be in the 30s. On the right shows precipitation all for next week. It does look like an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation, especially across the southern parts of Missouri. Drier conditions in the west, and a little pocket of here in Iowa, Minnesota, and parts of the Dakotas for drier conditions. And real quickly, I do want to note that this is the seasonal outlook that will be for November, December, and January, which actually came out last month. I do want to note that this new outlook will be coming up for winter, will be coming out tomorrow. So be sure to check the web link here to see the latest winter outlook that will be issued tomorrow for temperature and precipitation. I wouldn't be surprised to see much change in it, considering the pattern that we are in. It is a La Nina winter. And that's the forecast. And this is a very classic looking like seasonal winter outlook that we see when we have a La Nina condition, which is forecast to persist through the winter and into the first part of spring. It does indicate a higher likelihood of above normal temperatures for this 3-month period, drier conditions across the south, wetter conditions in the Ohio River Valley and the Pacific Northwest. Debbie, that's pretty much a weather report. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Pat. As always, we appreciate you being here and providing us with some great data, some good information. The piece of nugget that I took away for me in particular for today was that we're a little bit below normal when it comes to precipitation. So we have to remember that there may not be a lot of things that are in the garden per se. I know I've got some pansies and some pots and I'm still watering those. And then I'm still watering my trees. I trickle water out of my hose and move that around every so often because trees throughout the winter will definitely need to be watered, especially the evergreens. So just something to keep in mind. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and turn this over to Jennifer, who is going to be our moderator for the rest of this morning. Jennifer, thanks for being here with us.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start our questions off with a lawn question, and it deals with zoysia grass. And the question is, I have zoysia grass creeping into my fescue lawn. And what can I do to keep it from moving in? And Debbie, would you please answer this question?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do so. What I'd like to say is, I hate to say it like this, but it's almost like, well, good luck. I've got my own experience here is that my neighbor next door has got a lot of Bermuda grass. She doesn't maintain her lawn. She has a lawn care company that comes and mows it for her, but there's no fertilization, no caring for the lawn in any sense. And so her Bermuda grass has been slowly creeping into my yard. So it has the same characteristics of creeping like zoysia grass does. And so I've had to make the decision on if I want to make this almost like a war year after year after year to try to prevent the Bermuda grass from coming in. It is going to be very difficult to control any of those warm season grasses because of the way the turf actually grows and it creeps. And it's just something that you're going to have to maintain on an ongoing basis. The question kind of also asked, when is the best time to kind of take care of this? When the warm season grass is growing, do I go ahead and spray it with glyphosate so that it kills it? If you do it when the warm season grasses are growing, all you're going to be doing is having a bare spot there where weeds are actually going to take hold, because you don't want to plant grass seed during the middle of the summer when the warm season grasses are, you're going to be killing them out. So the best time to try to control this, if you're going to continue to do this, is to look at early spring and the very beginning of March, or usually that first week in September, where you'll go ahead and you can kill out that zoysia and then go ahead and replant your cool season grasses that you really want to have. And then try to maintain your mowing height appropriately. And it's just going to be a continuing battle, unfortunately, because of the way that zoysia grows. So that's the best advice that I can offer. If you need some additional information or want to talk one-on-one, I'm always happy to talk to folks when it comes to turf. That's all I have, Jennifer.
All right, thank you. Our next topic is going to be on moles and voles. And these are critters that a lot of gardeners have problems with in their lawn as well as their garden beds. And Kathy's going to tell us a little bit about each one of those.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let me get my slideshow up. Okay, so controlling moles and voles in the flower beds. And so it's no wonder that we would find tunnels in our flower beds. Those moles are looking for a food source in the moist, loose soil, especially after a rain. But the first thing that you need to do is identify what you're trying to control. And so moles and, voles moles, voles, and shrews all look alike. And those shrews and voles like to use the mole tunnels, so they take advantage of the mole's work. And on top of that, gopher mounds also sometimes get confused with molehills. One thing just to remember is that not all tunnels are reused. So the moles come in, especially after a rain, when those soils are moist, and they're looking for that food source. And the earthworms are active, and so they are making those tunnels, and are not being, and then the tunnels aren't reused. And what you're going to be looking for is active tunnels. So I just wanted to show you what a shrew and a gopher look like, just because they all are similar. They're small mammals. So anyway, all 4 pictures together, they don't look that much alike, but in a way they are similar. So we're going to start with a mole myth 1. Moles in the yard means there are grubs, right? Well, not necessarily. There are, that's false. And moles eat lots of different insects. They eat small vertebrae, earthworms, and white grubs as well. So we often see that mole activity in the early spring, and we might assume it's a white grub problem. And for some people, the first reaction might be to get a grub insecticide. According to the publication that we're going to put in the chat, that approach to mole control can present hazards to the environment and should not be tried. At this time, white grubs are way deeper in the soil, and that product really should not be used until it's the proper time for grub control. And that's usually in late July or August. And another little tip on their habits, moles are, they rarely eat vegetation, and they could, but it's just not normal. However, they can disturb plants by practically swimming through the soil, as they call it, with the way their paws and their claws are made. So they do disturb plants and can damage them and cause them to dry out. Voles, however, do damage ornamentals and other vegetation, and they are chewing on those on that material, as well as tree bark. That's why it's important to protect that bark, especially a newly planted tree, a young tree. So how about myth number 2? Juicy fruit, Bubblicious, or spearmint gum control moles. Well, as you might guess, that indeed is false. There's a lot of home remedies out there that are also not effective. Human hair, poison peanuts. And I just want to say about those peanuts and or other grains or nuts, moles don't eat them. And so they're not going to go after a poisonous one either. They're just going to go right over it. And it might harm other wildlife or animals that you don't want to harm. Mothballs, what I know about mothballs, what I read was a long time ago, mothballs control moths. And so they don't control moles or voles or much of anything else. Also, that idea of flooding out the tunnels is not effective. Actually, that's a favorable environment for the earthworms. So you could be encouraging them, which indeed would encourage the moles. Absolutely not a hose connected to a car exhaust. And those devices with the sonic waves, they too are not effective. You might also have heard, or if you go online to look, you'll see broken bottles, razor blades, these pinwheels. The idea that a small animal is going to cut themselves and bleed to death, that's not effective. Also, again, I mean, a child might get into that, or a pet. So there are a breed of dogs, I believe, that are effective in catching moles, and cats, of course, are. But is that the most effective way to control? Probably not. So ultimately, the success in the control of moles and voles will depend on finding the active runway and properly using baits or traps. So locating those active runways. And you want to do this before you place any baits or traps, for obvious reasons. You want to make sure they're there. You don't want to waste money and time. And but when you do have a run, you can take a stick or a broom handle and poke holes in it, go back in a couple of hours and inspect those holes. If they're plugged up with soil again, then that's an active runway. That mole has been back through there. You can also just flatten it one day, flatten a run. And when you go back in a few hours or the next day, if it's raised again, that's an active tunnel. And that's the tunnels that you want to spend your time on, placing any baits or traps. There's also we have a publication on controlling voles, and that we're going to put that in the chat. And they, again, their habit is different. And there's a process when using an old shingle and an apple. And so if you check out that publication, lots more information on that and different traps. Traps can get costly, especially for the voles. And so you want to make sure what's right for you if you decide to use a trap. Anyway, that apple and shingle thing's a pretty simple method of kind of arching that shingle, putting apples underneath it. You go back the next day, and if the apples are gone, then you've got an active run. So you want to, again, I just decide whether the method, what it takes to control the problem is worth it in relation to the cost of the control. So money, time, just take a look at that. And then in summary, the identification is key, learning more about their habits so that you can distinguish between them, locating the active runways, determine the damage versus the crop and the cost, and most importantly, be very patient. From what I understand, they kind of inherently know when you're on to them and you're going to start doing any work to try to control them. That's all I have, Jennifer. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Kathy. We had a question come in about mycorrhiza, and the question is, am I damaging the mycorrhiza when pulling weeds? And Justin, would you like to answer that, please?
Sure. So, you probably heard about mycorrhiza over the past couple of years. There's been a lot of interest in soil health and soil biology, and mycorrhiza is definitely one of those organisms that gets talked a lot about in the soil health discussions. So mycorrhizal fungi, it's a fungi that forms a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. You can see the picture down at the bottom right-hand corner. You can see the thicker threads there are the actual plant roots, and those smaller threads are the fungal hyphae. And so basically each organism gets something from this relationship. The plant root gets water and nutrients and an extension of the root network by their mycorrhizae. And the mycorrhizae then gets sugars from root exudates or materials that the root sloughs off to feed the fungal organism. So you can really vastly extend the root network of a plant when there is this mycorrhizal association. It can help in periods of drought to access water that otherwise wouldn't be available to the plant. Excessive tillage can damage these fungal networks, but these organisms do reproduce through spores. So that picture on the left-hand side is a picture of a mycorrhizal spore that's deposited in the soil that can then form a new mycorrhizal network or colony on an existing plant. So does pulling weeds hurt mycorrhizae? Well, if there's a mycorrhizal fungal network attached to the root of a weed, technically if you pull that weed out, you're damaging that network, but that mycorrhizal network was really helping support the growth of the weed. We know that if we don't manage weeds in the garden, that our plants are going to suffer. So I would definitely recommend pulling weeds and managing weeds. That's important for the growth of all plants, is to keep those weeds down. So you're not really damaging the mycorrhizae when you pull the weeds. You're only damaging the mycorrhiza that was connected to those weed roots. So, if you're interested in reducing tillage and reducing soil disturbance, you could use things like mulches to keep that weed pressure down and reduce weeding activities. That's the straight and skinny.
All right, thank you. So another question that we have is, are there any salt-tolerant ornamental grasses or perennials that will survive the cold of zone 5 and 6? And Justin is also going to answer this question.
Yeah, so salt tolerance generally in this area, we're talking about injury from road salt, and this is a pretty common issue. And we get a fair amount of questions about this. So basically, when you have excess road salt that comes in from de-icing activities and it gets in the soil, this can pull water from plant roots into the soil, and it can also occur from salt spray injury. So whether that salt's in the soil or that salt ends up on the leaves, it basically pulls water out of the plant and can induce these drought-like conditions in plants. You might notice poor growth, stunted growth of leaves, premature leaf drop, as well as scorched leaf margins or browning of leaf margins. And this injury is generally worse in poorly drained soils. And this is because these poorly drained soils, they can't leach out that salt when there's rainfall. So just a couple notes, watering can help leach out soils. Recommendations of 6 inches of water can leach up to 50% of the salts from the soil. You can also use gypsum, as this calcium will displace the sodium in the soil and can help mitigate these effects of excess road salts. General recommendations of 40 pounds per 1,000 square feet works best when it's incorporated into the soil. But this leads us to planting salt-tolerant species. There are some salt-tolerant ornamental grasses out there. These are just some from some lists from some different university publications. We're going to drop some links in the chat box out there, but this is a common issue with road salt injury. So there are some pretty good publications out there on the web about salt-tolerant ornamental grasses. These are just some of them that I found. Obviously, like that little blue stem is very familiar to a lot of folks, but with these ornamental grasses, just consider their invasive potential. Some of these can become pretty aggressive and spread through rhizomes. But definitely there are some options out there. There's also options for salt-tolerant bushes and salt-tolerant landscape trees. So check out some of these publications if that's an issue that you're dealing with, and you find some resources out there.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in is, I'm looking for specific native and or heirloom plants with large open flowers that beneficial insects can easily get to the nectar. What are the best plants to attract and keep syrphid flies, rove beetles, soldier beetles, minute pirate bugs, predator mites, ladybugs, etc.? And Tamara, would you like to answer this one for us, please?
Of course, I always like any opportunity to talk about insects. So I am going to kind of focus on pollinators, though I do want to point out that anything that we're doing to help the pollinators are also going to help our other insects, our other beneficial insects, such as our predators that are good for biocontrol. So I do want to also just point out that when we're talking about pollinators, usually I'm talking about bees. There are a lot of other pollinators, but bees are our main pollinator, and flies would be next. And here in Missouri, we have over 450 species of native bees. And that actually includes about 10 species of bumblebees. Like I said, there are other pollinating orders, family species. This includes flies, butterflies, moths, and beetles. So when we're looking to create better habitat, I think this is what the question is going for. How do I create better habitat? What are specific plants? I'm going to get into that. Keep in mind that insects see these plants as food sources for nectar and pollen, and some other substances such as propolis or even fragrances. So we see flowers as aesthetically pleasing or not, but hopefully there's also an awareness of how these plants fit into the bigger picture. For example, creating food and habitat resources for our insects, especially for these beneficials. There's also beneficial underground effects such as the deep roots that they can put in the ground to prevent or reduce erosion, and it also improves aeration. So what can you do specifically with this question? What plants can we do to help our pollinators, help our beneficials? We can plant more flowers and we can create year-round blooms. So I'm gonna show you some specific plants that you can put in. In the spring, you can early spring, you can put in crocus, and these are some pictures of some crocus that I actually planted directly in my lawn. And so my lawn is not green in February or even in March, and so it's fun to have these things just pop up. They're one of the earliest blooming flowers, and they do create that food source for some of those early bees that are coming out. I did put some specific plants that have flowers that also are producing the nectar sources that are helpful to these early insects that are out. In there are flowers, there are shrubs, there are trees. You can see on the screen, so serviceberry, chokecherry, blueberries, a lot of the weeds that we would think of in a lawn, like dandelions or some of those other flowers. They are an important food source. They're late spring wildflowers, so foxglove, beard tongue, bee balm, blue false indigo, a lot of different things. And the question talked about big plants that are going to support when things land on them. Some of our pollinators need that wide platform, but others have a siphoning tongue that will get into the flowers. So you need to have a variety of flowers. Some of these flowers are going to have kind of a broad face, and others are going to have tubular type flowers so that the tongue can actually get in there. So there's a huge variety of flowers that you can have. And I'm going to put in the chat a lot of different resources that you can use to go and get even more plants, plant ideas. So we just talked about some of the spring flowers, but there are also, of course, a lot of flowers that bloom in the fall. So here are some St. John's wort, Culver's fruit, purple prairie clover, ironweed, a lot of different flowers. One that I do want to point out are any of those in the Asteraceae family. So that would be your sunflowers. This picture right here, actually, all of these are pictures that I took of flowers in my gardens or when I've been traveling. And any of our sunflowers, the bees love them, and not just bees, but a lot of our other plants or other insects. So another resource, this is going to be one of those that I'll list in the chat. Grow Native has a bunch of top 10 native plant lists that you can try out. This is one of my favorite, obviously, because it's outstanding native plants for pollinators. This is just a beginning for plants that you can put in. You just need to find something that works for you, but there are a lot of absolutely beautiful plants that are great for our pollinators. And keep in mind, again, when we're making something good for our pollinators, it's making it good for all of our other beneficial insects. So with our pollinators or creating better habitat, it's not just about planting more flowers, but it's also creating good nesting sites. So do leave some bare ground in your garden. Don't cover everything. Mulch is good in a lot of instances, but sometimes we can leave it bare because that's our native bees need that. Also, leave some plants in place through the winter. You might want to not cut them back, or if you do need to cut some of them back, cut them back about 18 inches or 12 inches, and then leave the stems on the ground, and that provides nesting areas for many of our bees. And this is something that maybe you shouldn't do. Bee hotels can be okay. It kind of makes us feel good, but it actually might not be good for the bees because it brings a lot of typically solitary nesting bees together in a crowded place, which makes it easier for parasites to get to them. Also, keep in mind if you are using these flowers to attract bees into your yard that you need to use IPM. And when we use integrated pest management, that so it means that we take care of the problems that we have, but it also means that we're doing it very responsibly. And part of that is when I go through this chart, I leave insecticides at the very end, and that's even a maybe. So if you have a problem, don't reach for pesticide first. There are a lot of other things that you can do to prevent problems before you'd ever have to go for some sort of pesticide, because obviously that will kill our insects. And they don't, most pesticides are not going to distinguish between good or bad, even if it says so on the package. And finally, in creating more nesting sites, if you were to leave your leaves, that does create a very beneficial habitat for invertebrates. It provides that winter cover. And these leaves can sometimes mean the difference between life and death because they need that cover from a protected place near the ground. And Xerces Society has a lot of information on this topic. And this actually goes into the next topic because when I say leave the leaves, well, what happens if you have a lot of leaves? What do you do with all of those leaves? Do you blow them away? Do you bag and dispose them? Do you shred them? Do you leave them in place? I'm gonna let you know that there's probably a combination of this. This picture is actually from a walk I took in my in my neighborhood. And when I saw it, the thought came to mind. There are two kinds of people in the world. We have those who like to have their lawn be perfect and those who let the leaves pile up. There really are several different ways, not just two, but like I said, some people like to pick up all the leaves and haul them away. Others like to leave the leaves. There are pros and cons to both approaches. A compromise is often the best way. And then also it depends a lot on your preferences. So Xerces Society has a campaign, Leave the Leaves, and it's a great campaign. And they talk about leaving those leaves to make sure that you are providing that really good habitat for our pollinators or any of our invertebrates that we want to keep. So do you leave them whole or do you shred them? Ideally for our insects, you'd leave them whole so that any eggs or chrysalis that are attached to those or hiding in them are not destroyed. It also creates this free mulch that you have. Leaf mulch is great. So if you have a choice between leaving the leaves or shredding them, it's better to leave them whole. But I also realize that's not going to be possible in every instance. If you have a natural setting, then leave them whole. If they're going to stay on your lawn or if they're in your lawn, shredding them with the mower is a better way to do it. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. If you don't have enough natural settings or flower beds to put the leaves there, then you might actually want to consider having a smaller lawn or having more flower beds, or you can bag those leaves up and share them with the neighbor. These things I want you to keep in mind are not necessarily what you're going to do in a vegetable garden. In those gardens, you might want to have shredded leaves as mulch as well. So again, there's lots of different options. If you are having your leaves in your lawn and you can just mow over them, here are some good tips. You're going to mow at the normal height. You're going to use a sharp mower. Make sure your mower blade. Make sure that your mower blades are really sharp because it's a little bit harder work for your mower to chop up those leaves. You also want to make sure the leaves are dry and go really slowly because again, these leaves don't chop as well. But I'm going to put some more resources in the chat also for tips on mowing your leaves. What you do not want to do though is just let the leaves go into the street. Do not blow your leaves into the street and just let nature take care of them. Because what ends up happening is they end up in our waterways. And that's not good for our waterways. It pollutes them, it increases the nutrient content, which is not what we want to have happen in our waterways. So please make sure that you are being responsible with these. We do have a program called Healthy Yards for Clear Streams that talks more about ways to deal with this and to be responsible with your lawn and gardens. And I believe we will have that coming up next year. So I just wanted to put in just a little bug in your ear. Anyway, that's what I have for this today. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tamara. Our next topic is selecting a Christmas tree. And it's hard to believe that Thanksgiving will be here a week from tomorrow. And with that comes decorating for the holidays. And some people will go out after Christmas dinner and select a Christmas tree, whether it be at a Christmas tree farm or a garden center or retail lot. So we thought it would be timely to talk about what to look for when selecting a Christmas tree. Well, the first step that you need to do is decide where you're going to put the tree in your home. You want to measure the height and the width of the space that you have available in the room where you're going to put the tree. And I'll just tell you, I've made that mistake. I have made the mistake of going to the tree farm and wanting one of the biggest, prettiest trees there, and I didn't measure the space I have for it. And then I've gotten it home and it was too big, and we had to cut the top out of it to shorten it. So this is important. Make sure you know how big your ceilings are and how big the space is where you want to put the tree. And then head into the field and select the tree that fits your predetermined needs. Always choose a fresh tree. And a fresh tree is going to look green. It's going to look healthy. It's going to look green. It's not going to have that dull, dry appearance. It's not going to have a lot of brown needles. You might find a few in the inner part of the tree, but most garden centers as well as tree farms have shakers. Well, they will shake the needles out for you. So look for just a fresh, healthy green tree. You also want to check the trunk to make sure that it is sufficiently straight. Keep in mind that pines will usually have at least some crook in their trunks. And this is kind of important. So we have selected a tree in the past where it was a little crooked, a little too crooked for the tree stand, and we had to work on it to get it to fit. And my husband was with me, and he's like, "Why did you choose a crooked tree?" And to me, I'm looking more for that pretty shape, but it's important to look at all aspects of the tree. Make sure your trunk is straight. Make sure it's going to fit in that tree stand that you have. And then check that the tree has a long enough trunk to accommodate your stand. If you get a trunk that's too short, that may not work in your tree stand. So that's something you want to also look at. And then here in the photo, you see where they have wrapped your tree. So most farms will shake your tree or blow the tree to get the dead needles out of it. And then they will wrap it for you if you want it wrapped. And in the photo, I don't have the full picture of the tractor, but you can see the tractor tire there, and there was an implement on there, and it shakes the tree and gets out those dead needles. And then it's ran through that thing you see here on this green looking table. They run it through there and they net it, and you can take it home that way. Sometimes we don't have ours wrapped. We just throw it in the back of the truck. I'm not going all that far. But if you go, if you're going a distance, you may want to consider having it wrapped. Once you get the tree home, make a 1-inch cut at the bottom of the tree. So you're going to take off about 1 inch from that trunk, and then place the tree in a sturdy stand, or I use a 5-gallon bucket of water. And the rule of thumb is you want about 1 quart for every inch of diameter of the trunk. So I often, let it sit in that that 5-gallon bucket of water for a while, let it take in more water before I actually bring it in the house. But once you get it in the house, get it in the tree stand, make sure it's good and tight, it's not going to fall over, and then fill your reservoir full of water and keep the reservoir full. One mistake that a lot of people make that have live trees in their house is that they don't remember to check the reservoir, and it gets low, and then the tree doesn't take in water and it starts to dry out, and then it becomes a fire hazard. So every day you need to be checking that water reservoir. And it seems like I use a pitcher, a pitcher I'd put Kool-Aid in or something like that. And then I use that to fill up my reservoir. And I do that just about every day, especially for the first 2 weeks. It really takes in a lot of water. And if the base dries out, resin will form over the cut end, and the tree will not be able to absorb water, and it will dry out quickly. You want to make sure that you check your Christmas lights for worn or electrical cords or burned out lights. So make sure that your Christmas lights are in working order before you string them on the tree. Many fresh cut trees, if properly cared for, will last at least 5 weeks before drying out. And I will say, if you get it from a Christmas tree farm and you cut it and you bring it home, it really will last for about 4 to 5 weeks. Now, I've had different experience buying from a tree lot. Now, sometimes when you go to a garden center or tree lot, those trees have been cut weeks before you go and purchase it, and they're already on their way to drying out. So that tree may not last 4 to 5 weeks. And then after Christmas, consider recycling your tree. We take our Christmas tree and we put it in our pond for fish cover. So that's one way you can get rid of your Christmas tree. If you have a pond, put your tree in the pond. Some communities have a recyclable area where you can take your tree and put it in a recyclable bin or a pile, and then they'll put it in lakes. You could also put it in your backyard and use it for habitat for birds. You can hang a feeder on it, or our little pine cone feeders you make yourself, and you stuff that with peanut butter. You could do that with your Christmas tree. So there's some things you could do after Christmas. And I just wanted to quickly show you some of my favorite photos from our experience going to the Christmas tree farm. And Christmas tree farms are often like going to the farmer's market. It becomes a social event and a family affair. And you can see we have our dogs with us. And one reason we bring the dogs sometimes is because the tree farm we go to is south of Kirksville, and they have a log cabin, and it's a wonderful place to have a family photo. And the dogs are part of the family. So some years we take the dogs, not every year though. This is a shot standing on top of the hill looking down into the parking area and the log cabin. I feel like I'm going into an 1880s, cabin. There's a wood stove burning in there and candy canes, and it's an experience. Again, it's like going to the farmer's market. It's exciting, and my family likes to do that. And then here's a shot of the trees. And here in the last few years, I've been letting my boys cut the tree down. Last year I had a white pine. I usually get a Scotch pine. Scotch pines are better for heavy ornaments. White pines are not so good for heavy ornaments. I like the look of a white pine, but it doesn't hold my heavy ornaments very well. There's our family photo from last year in 2020. And there you see some trees from previous years. That one in the middle, I had to have the biggest, prettiest probably tree on the farm, and it was big. And then in the years since, I have realized I don't need such a big tree, and we've actually found one that was a better fit. Okay, so that's all I have on selecting a Christmas tree. I hope everybody enjoys going to the tree farm and having a good experience, and enjoy your holidays. Okay, our next topic is pine tree needles turning yellow. And some people have experienced this with their white pines, and Peng's going to tell us about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peng Tian. I'm the director of the MU Plant Diagnostic Clinic. I'm really glad to be here, and let's talk about the needle yellowing of evergreen trees. So I moved to Missouri in February this year, and so far really enjoying the fall color here in Columbia, Missouri. So you may know that many trees change colors at this time, such as maple tree, oak, or aspen trees. But do you know that evergreen trees will also turn yellow in the fall? So my colleague, Miss Debbie Kelly, sent me 2 photos this week.
Hey.
And if you look at them, if this is your tree, you would be like, uh-oh, what's wrong with my tree? It is dying. It is yellowing from the entire tree, from top to the bottom. Should I spray any chemicals? Should I start trimming those dead tissue? However, the truth is, this photo was taken 2 weeks ago, and this photo was taken this week. You can see that 2 weeks ago, there's a lot of yellowing on the entire tree, but after 2 weeks, all the yellowing needles fell on the ground, and the tree remained healthy. And Miss Debbie Kelly basically didn't do anything. So what did we learn? It is actually a really normal and natural process for seasonal needle drop for most evergreens. So evergreens lose a portion of their foliar needles on the yellow base. It is very noticeable for white pines, like I show in this photo. It is less noticeable on spruce, ferns, and other pines. It does not mean that they don't shed needles. It's just because they retain a really high percentage of green needles, so that the yellowing needle will not become noticeable. Just like you may see my photo in the following, in my photos in the following slides, and you may not notice I have silver hair inside my black hair. So for the needle drop, the seasonal needle drop is uniformly distributed throughout the inner part of the evergreen. It is the oldest leaf or needles which are shed, and the needles will turn uniformly yellow or brown and drop on the ground. However, if those needle drops continue to progress and affect both old and young needles, or even some causing some dieback issue or twig or tape blight, you may need to consider whether your plant has gotten any disease. So there are several factors that can cause needle blight and needle dieback. Let's first talk about environmental stress. For the droughts, of course, if you have really low soil moisture and the evergreen may have trouble getting enough water to all the needles. As a result, the bottom needle will die first to help to hydrate the rest of the tree. So that's for the drought stress. Soil conditions. Let's talk about the nutrition level, pH level, and the soil, the compact soil. They can all affect the growth of the performance of the tree. If you have a newly planted tree, like I was showing in this photo, they may have established problem. They may have a mulch problem or weed control problem, or you may have planted too deep. Lastly, the harsh winter wind could pose a threat to the pine or spruce tree, particularly on the top of the tree. So in addition to the environmental stress, there are several insect or fungal pathogens can also cause needle blight and needle dieback. In comparison to fungal pathogens, I would say insect damage would be more visible and easier to identify. Here are two examples. First is pine needle scales. You can see those waxy white shell of the scales covered all over the needle. So they are scale disease. They normally hatch in the spring, and the insects, the crawler will start crawling and seeking the feeding site. Once they settle down, they will form a new waxy yellow shell attached to the needle. This photo shows a pine aphids. You can see all the black aphids crawling on the twig. So this is what I'm talking about. The insect damage may be easier to identify based on your naked eyes. And if the disease pressure is really high, you may need to consider spraying insecticide early in the season. In addition to the insect damage, there are several different fungal pathogens can cause needle blight or needle dieback. Here are some examples. We have Dothistroma and a brown needle blight. You can tell on the specific needle, they're no longer on the older needle, they're on the newer development needles, and they can cause those sectional lesions. And not only for needles, they can also cause the tip blights or branch blights, such as the Phomopsis tip blights. Another two diseases are the Pacillotiopsis and the Philistucta needle blights, and they have they normally cause damage for the newly developed shoots or needles. There's a little bit tip to identify fungal pathogen. Some fungal pathogen may produce those black dots on the surface of the needle of leaflets, and they are the fruiting bodies on the mature leaves. So they will overwinter in these structures, and they will germinate and produce spores to transmit this disease in the spring with rainfall or with wind. So, and the different fungal pathogen confer different damage to the disease. So that's why accurate diagnosis is really essential to identify the diseases and recommend proper disease management plans. Therefore, MU Plant Diagnostic Clinic is here to help you, and we have services including plant disease, turf disease, and the plant ID and insect ID services. And you can find us by Google our name on the website, and contact us by emailing us or calling our lab, and we're so glad to help you. And if you, like Jennifer said, if you have a dying Christmas tree in your living room, don't call me, because they're gonna die and I cannot save them. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pong. So we had a lot of good topics today, and want to thank all of our presenters for presenting their topic. I'm going to turn it back over to Debbie now at this time.
Great, thanks. And thanks everyone for all of your answers to the questions that come in. And we're, as you can all tell, we're enthusiastic about sharing the knowledge and information that we have when it comes to all these questions that you guys ask us. What I'd like to let you know, again, here is the map. I'm going to leave it up while I convey a couple of topics to you. I want to let you know that we're getting to the end of the year. And those of us in Extension, we always have to do a report back to show the impact and outcomes of our programming. And so we've created a Qualtrics survey asking for your input on what you think about the town halls. Have they been informational? Are they answering your questions? We've got, I don't remember the exact number of questions that we have in our evaluation survey. And so we would like each of you to take the time, it won't take very long, just a couple of minutes, to go ahead and fill out that survey for us. That will help us to fine tune the town halls to make them even better. And we'll be able to answer your questions, hopefully, in a way that is going to be able to be presentable to you so that you can make those changes on your landscape, your gardens, and in your yards. What I'd also like to do is let you know that we have moved, besides just doing this live via Zoom, you now, if you want, you can watch us live on YouTube. And that would be, if you go into the YouTube in general, you can type in, once you're in there, MUIPM into the search box, such as what you see right here. And then you will see and click on Home Horticulture once you're on this channel. And you'll see all of the snippets that we do. And you'll also be able to see the live stream. And we hope that that's another way and another format that folks will be able to participate in our live streams. And then also, if you have additional questions in the future, you can email any one of us. We're happy to answer that. Or you can go back out to the registration page at this URL above, and we can then get that question and we'll answer it in our next town hall. So again, we're meeting monthly. We'll meet December 15th, January 19th, February 16th, March 16th, and then again in April, we'll start week by week and answering all of your questions. So again, here is the map with all of us. I'll leave that up as we come to a close. We want to say thank you for joining us, and we hope that everyone has a nice Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you.